Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, empowering men and masculinity in the anti-male age. I'm your host, Brian Crawl, and today I'm going to be mansplaining to you about evaluating and testing women. But before I get started, could you just hit that like button for me? Because any women who see this are going to hit the dislike. Thanks. Women seduce us men not through logic and intellect, but emotions and sexuality. Things that produce feelings. And why would they do so through these things instead of the rational mind, as men are more rational-minded than emotional-minded? Well, because our rational minds may not actually find what the women are doing to be agreeable. And the feelings produced by the emotional and sexual mental faculties are actually capable of shutting down the rational mind. We are even taught by relationship counselors and gurus such as Tony Robbins that relationships should not be a tit-for-tat exchange, that keeping track of things is not healthy in a relationship, that the give and take shouldn't be accounted for, but should just be generally mutual. And yet, as I illustrated in my relationship Venn diagram video linked below, and as many of us men already know, relationships between men and women aren't generally mutual. And suspending the rational mind's critical thinking and ability to evaluate if a woman is actually meeting us halfway and if the relationship is really mutual allows women to use and exploit us men. Being seduced, or worse, falling in love and not evaluating a woman and if she's actually good for you will tend to get you taken advantage of and hurt, as we often find out. It is absolutely crucial to be able to do the opposite of what our culture is telling us. And instead of suspending your rational judgment in order to experience feelings, to suspend your engagement with these feelings and to take a moment to rationalize things and evaluate them with purely objective, critical thinking. I personally have gotten hurt redundantly by women who I let myself go into the experience of passionately falling in love with, and only afterwards, once they had ripped my heart out and left me in ruins, would I actually start to look at the situation more rationally and start reassuring myself of all of the objective facts that I was actually better off without her. And it would all appear to me so clear as day then, and I would think to myself, why didn't I look at all of this sooner? Why didn't I do this at the beginning instead of at the end? All of this loss and pain and suffering could have been avoided if I had done so. So why the fuck didn't I? The answer is twofold. One, when you're experiencing feelings so good as falling in love or having orgasms with a girl who you think might be the one, well, you don't really want to try to convince yourself of otherwise, do you? And two, it isn't what I've been taught is healthy in a developing relationship. As I said at the beginning of this video, we are taught to give in to the experience of these feelings and not to objectively analyze and evaluate the relationship dynamic to make sure it is just. But after seeing a serious pattern of only unhealthy relationships developing out of this paradigm, I think that these teachings were actually just another one of the lies of the gynocentric romantic ideology that us men are brainwashed with in order to usher us into self-sacrificing relationships with female users and slave drivers. I now believe that the only real way to make sure you aren't in an unhealthy relationship is to evaluate things critically from the very start. But how do we do that? Well, let's go over some of the basic fundamental ways of evaluating women, and then after that we'll talk about how to test them just to make sure. First, you want to ask yourself why questions to rationally analyze your feelings and see if there are good enough reasons for you to follow through on them, such as, why is it that I want her? Why do I have these feelings for her? Why do I love her or think I love her? Why do I want a relationship with her? If it's marriage or some specific kind of relationship, ask yourself why you want that specific type of relationship with her. And if you can come up with what seem to be good reasons, you may even want to ask yourself why you think these things, and if these reasons are really good enough, as a man falling in love may actually think he loves everything about a girl, only to find out months or years later that he actually hates all of them. So if you are producing answers that you think are valid here, you need to then evaluate things even further. So next, ask other rational-minded questions such as, could this just be hormones or rose-colored glasses? Is this really in my best interest, and how exactly? Can I be sure that I can rely upon her to do right by me? And, how? Again. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, as long as you're making this list of definitive reasons why you ought to be with her, make sure you ask yourself, what are the reasons why I ought not to be with her? And that is key here, all right? You don't want to just write a list of her positive attributes or what you perceive to be her positive attributes. What you want to do is you want to create a list of both the positives and the negatives. All right, make sure you do that, because if you cannot think of any negatives, I guarantee you it's not because there are no negatives with her. All right, it is just because you aren't seeing them. All right, so you need to create an actual written list with both columns, and it could be a pros and cons list or a cost benefit analysis or a Venn diagram like the one I illustrated in the video linked below. I like the Venn diagram because you can evaluate the give and the take of a relationship as well as the in-between, right, and what you both get out of it. But if you don't want to use a Venn diagram, you can use some sort of accounting method like what is ingoing versus outgoing and being exchanged between the two of you. But one way or another, you need to account for what you are getting out of the relationship and what you are putting in, and evaluate the contrast between the two and make sure the former is worth the latter, because if it isn't, and you are putting in more than you're getting out, the relationship isn't fair and just, and you are definitely being taken advantage of or exploited. So you need to make sure that is not what is happening or what is going to happen before it becomes too late, and it already has. But you don't want to just evaluate what you're getting out of the relationship. You also want to evaluate the girl's character very critically and analyze her faults and flaws and any other negatives you can see about her personality, as these will absolutely affect you in the long run, and probably very much so. Much more so than you could probably even tell at first, all right? Especially if your judgment of the future is clouded by optimism and, wishful thinking of those romantic feelings and the rose-colored glasses that they put on your eyes. So, since a man who is being seduced or falling in love is predisposed to admiring the object of his affection, it is important to take a break from that and to take a look at the opposite side of her. So make a list of what you don't like about her. List the things she does that annoy you. List her bad habits. List things she's terrible at doing. List her worst traits. List anything she has done to you that you didn't like or felt bad about. List any and all negatives about her. And then take a look at this list. And just to make sure, ask yourself if you are being petty or picky. Ask yourself if these are real issues, if you're not just making an issue where there isn't one, because that can tend to happen, especially with womanizers like myself. So we don't want to do the opposite of putting on rose-colored glasses and black pill ourselves when we, may have gotten one of the only good girls out there. Right? So you don't want to go making mountains out of molehills. You want to make sure you are being completely objective and realistic. So as long as you're doing that, take a look at this list and ask yourself, what is it going to be like when these negative things about her continue over time? Perhaps more and more over time. And as they do continue, they will be getting on your nerves more and more. And they will probably be getting worse over time as she hides her faults and flaws from you less, or as her tendencies grow as she ages, as these are exactly the things that happen in long-term relationships as two people get older together. And then once you've taken a good, honest, objective look at all that and considered what it's really going to be like over time, you then want to look through the list for any red flags. Red flags is basically a popular term for unhealthy behavioral cues that indicate an unhealthy disposition towards you or a relationship, or perhaps some sort of neuroses or mental health issue, or something that is a sign they are not going to be a healthy partner for you, as most women these days cannot relate to us men in a healthy way, and yet they get away with it because most men just allow it. But not you, because you are watching this video. And if your answers are positive and honest enough to merit continued optimism about being with her, lastly, you want to ask yourself some final preparatory questions just to make sure that you are safe, such as, how should I respond when she contradicts herself, or goes back on her word, or acts two-faced, or flip-flops and changes on me? What would I do if she turns into a different person after I commit to her, or we move in together, or tie the knot, or sometime down the road, as will probably be the case, as most people do change as they age, and most people do not show themselves totally to people who they are dating. You're going to be finding out more and more about them over time, which oftentimes makes it seem like they are a different person than they were when you started dating them, because they were, only revealing their best side to you, or maybe even putting on a mask. So it's important to consider how you'd react and what you would do when they change on you and you find out that they are not exactly the person that you first thought they were. And lastly, you want to ask yourself how you can protect yourself and make sure you do not get exploited or hurt by her, just in case she doesn't have your best interest in mind. And then after your initial evaluation of a woman, if she hasn't thrown up any red flags and made you turn around, the next thing you're going to want to do is test her to see if she is another one of these toxic females in disguise. It's no secret that women test men they are interested in to see if he's the type of guy she could be with, but most men do not do the same thing with women, and then end up with abusive and even psychotic girlfriends who are just manipulating and exploiting them. So obviously testing girls for this is incredibly important for men. Back when I was dating, I would test the women I was talking to before going out on a date with them. And you'd be surprised at how many women would show themselves to be abusive characters right then and there. And I'd know not to fuck with them. It's really quite easy, and anyone can do it. Simply politely draw a personal boundary of respect and request that they do something with you a little differently out of respect for you. Now, it's important that you do this only in a situation in which it would be appropriate to make such a request, and that you ask politely, as there's a lot of guys out there in the alpha male community and the tradcon community, those parts of the manosphere that say that women should always be submissive, and that if a woman's not being submissive to you no matter what, she's not a real woman. But a lot of these guys are just fucking narcissists who are extremely domineering. I mean, you try to talk to them and you realize, they expect everyone to supplicate to them and act extremely submissively while they go about being domineering like a bully. And they really don't know how to talk to people. So I'm not saying that you should act like an asshole to see if she supplicates to you, right? Obviously you wouldn't come into her home and start demanding her to change her own personal space for you or anything like that, all right? But if she were in your home, it would be totally appropriate, of course, for you to ask her to do something like take her shoes off when she comes in. So that's the type of request we are talking about, okay? Something that would be considered socially appropriate by polite society. But not the shoes example, because that's so commonplace. It would take a complete psychopath to just walk in and say no and start dirtying up your clean floors on purpose. And even then, most psychopaths probably wouldn't even do that. The point is that you aren't going to seem like a domineering control freak for asking someone to take off their shoes when entering your home. But it's probably not going to tell you if they really respect you or not. And it's also best to not have to wait until a girl is in your home for a nice romantic date to find out that she doesn't really fucking respect you. So as I said, I start as soon as we begin talking. And as a social scientist, I've found that how someone communicates with someone else will be most telling. So one of the best ways to test a woman is by asking her to speak to you in a different way. Saying, for instance, I don't really like people calling me that, or I don't really like people talking to me like that. So I'm going to ask you to speak to me a little differently. This often comes up if a girl calls me a boy instead of a man, or refers to me as something other than my name, or uses some sort of slang when talking to me, or uses some sort of misandry, or something like that. Basically, the same things that women are known for doing when they want a man to speak to them with a little more respect. It's important that men be able to do the same thing for women. And then, as long as they can speak to you with respect, once you do have them over to your home, it is still important to make sure that they are going to respect the fact that it is your home and that they are a guest in it. So I always do something with girls I have over, like asking them to do something differently, such as asking for them to put their cup into the sink and rinse it when they are done. Or if I've had them over for dinner, to put their dishes into the sink and rinse them when they are done. Or do literally anything the way you like it to be done around your home, as long as, again, you aren't coming off like a domineering control freak, and it is something that would be an appropriate request. You want to make sure you're being socially appropriate and polite and a good host, all right? You just want to make sure that they are also an equally respectful guest. And after all, it's your home, not theirs, all right? So if it seems at all like she doesn't like being asked to change her behavior, even when it is socially appropriate in polite society for someone to ask her to do so, then you should stop seeing her, because she obviously doesn't care about respecting others. And what is that a sign of? That she is too high on the narcissism scale to do so, as many modern women are. So they literally don't want to be told how a man likes to be treated with respect, or how I want them to respect my home while I play host for them and cater to their wants and needs in it, which anyone in polite society knows I deserve some respect and regard for. I mean, I am a very gracious host, and I ask for very little in return. I just want my guests to respect my home and me as a host. But a narcissistic or dark triad woman will want to be treated as the queen of any domain she is in, and thinks of others as servants or slaves. So she doesn't want to have to show them respect. So when you are testing the respectfulness of women and asking for them to show you some respect, many of them will get defensive, bitchy, or even become hostile and abusive. I've had countless women, for instance, call me boy instead of my name, or man, or anything more respectful than boy. And when I tell them I'm not a boy, I'm a man, and I'd rather be called by name, and I'd also prefer that they ask me before starting to call me any other names than my own. Many women, instead of just saying okay, say things like, "Oh my God, I was joking. If you were a real man, you'd know that, so don't tell me how to talk." That is exactly how a narcissistic or dark triad woman thinks and acts towards others. They think, I'll call you and talk to you however I want, and if you don't like it, you can fuck off. And you'd better not say anything about it, otherwise I'll just double down and become even more abusive, and even try to break down your sense of gender identity for not supplicating to me and for having sovereignty and wanting respect. God, who does this man think that he is? Some kind of king? Doesn't he know that I'm the queen here and he's just a mere serf? So you can see why it's so important to be able to test women to see if she is a user or abuser before you start dating them and having them over to your home, right? And most importantly, to make sure of her before you start getting too attached to her, or God forbid, think that you are falling in love with her, only to realize that she's a narcissist who doesn't even respect you and your boundaries and is only going to behave abusively and exploitatively towards you and just use you until you are all used up, and then discard you without any humanity and move on, leaving you heartbroken and devastated. So make sure you use these simple, basic evaluation and testing tactics on any woman you are talking to and trying to date, or are actually dating, before it gets too serious. And if you would like to learn some more advanced methods of evaluating and testing women, or learn about what all the red flags are that you should be looking for, or if you have a woman who you are dating who who you are unsure of and need some objective help with evaluating if she is good for you or not, feel free to reach out to me at the email below to schedule a consultation. But otherwise, that concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that well enough for you guys. If I did, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and check out the links below for more resources for your masculine self-development. And if you can afford to donate, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fighting the good fight for men like you. And you can stay tuned for the next video coming out soon, which will be on power and control in relationships. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.